Think of the last time you watched a movie and it had a moment that was so emotional that it affected you for the rest of your day. Like, a moment that brings you to tears just thinking about it again right now. Or maybe that's something that only happens to me. An example might be the beginning of Up, or maybe the part in Endgame, spoiler warning, where Iron Man dies, or maybe the ending of Brokeback Mountain. These scenes are all able to deeply affect most people because they might be shocking or extremely emotional after a long build-up, or they tap into your sense of futility against the injustice of the universe itself. But that's really it. Only those scenes do that out of these movies that are otherwise full of scenes that are goofy, action-packed, or gay. I never watched Brokeback Mountain. Anyway, whatever happened to the good old-fashioned Greek tragedy? The oldest and probably most iconic definition of a tragedy comes from ancient Greece, specifically Aristotle. In Aristotle's Poetics, he outlines what is necessary for a tragic play, and also notes the important distinction between tragedy and comedy. I know that to me and you, in our current cultural environment, there isn't an easier contrast to make. I mean, comedy makes you happy and tragedy makes you sad, right? Sure, but Aristotle saw things differently. First, Aristotle saw art in general as an imitation of life. Art, to him, is nothing more than someone looking at life and the world and imitating how it is or how they think it should be. That's why he splits drama into the two categories of comedy and tragedy. Comedy is an imitation of the inferior, something that pokes fun at someone who doesn't know any better. This can range anywhere from laughing at an idiot who has convinced himself that squirting lemon juice into his eyes will cure his cataracts, to laughing at a king because he was so confident in the loyalty of his subjects that he leaves his treasury unlocked, only to find all his gold stolen the very next morning. That's all well and good, but if art is nothing but making fun of people, it's going to be difficult to make people feel moved by an artistic experience in more than one way. That's where the Greek tragedy comes in. A tragedy, to Aristotle, is an imitation of life as it truly is, with much more serious implications. A tragedy is a heart-wrenching slog through an unfortunate situation that reveals facts about life to the audience through several literary devices. The main, basic tragedy, according to Aristotle, went like this. A relatable and respectable tragic hero, who possesses a hamartia, a fatal flaw, is presented with a situation where they have to make a choice. Due to their hamartia, they make the wrong choice, and at first, things are kind of okay, but the situation gradually worsens and worsens until by the end, the hero and everyone he cares about is racked with agony and or death. Aristotle believed the hero shouldn't die because they had to leave the event knowing more than they did, taking a life lesson out of the usually literal bloodbath they just went through. But sometimes they do anyway. They would also have to include song and chorus and everything, but we're not going to cover that requirement, that's a whole other video. A common thing that Greek tragedies would often include would be a reversal of the situation, which is pretty self-explanatory. It would usually be something like a king being reduced to a street urchin, or an Olympic athlete being crippled or sick, or something like that. Another common thing would be the hero making the wrong choice, knowing it was the wrong choice, but being ignorant of the immense risk involved, and being taught that risk the hard way. There's almost always one scene in particular that outshines all the rest in terms of displaying suffering and agony, often called the catastrophe. It comes right before or right after the anagnorisis, which is the hero's realization, or just verbalization, of their mistake. Probably one of the most famous Greek tragedies of all time is Oedipus Rex, which you've probably heard of and might have even read. In case you haven't, I'll give you a quick rundown. The play starts with the chorus singing about how Oedipus, a well-respected and generally loved king, is about to find out an unsettling truth that will drive him and his family into complete turmoil. Basically, when Oedipus was born in the kingdom of Corinth, he was immediately thrown out into the woods by his mother and father, who happened to be the king and queen at the time, because they didn't want him. Someone found him though and rescued him, leading to him living a quiet life in Corinth until a seer tells him that he is fated to kill his father and marry his mother, and he's driven to leave for a different kingdom called Thebes. Fast forward a bit, and Oedipus has now become the king of Thebes by just being a generally awesome guy. The old king of Thebes, Laius, has just been assassinated. Naturally, this causes myriad supernatural plagues to befall his subjects, and Oedipus figures out that if they find and kill the guy who did it, the plagues will go away. So he sent his brother-in-law to go look for him, but When he came back and couldn't find anything, he turned to the blind prophet Tiresias, who shows up in every Greek story ever. Tiresias at first says he's not going to tell Oedipus who did it, which is a huge red flag. Him and Oedipus basically go back and forth in a "are you sure you're sure" type conversation before Tiresias finally says that Oedipus did it. Oedipus immediately doubts the words of the old wise future-telling guy who's never wrong, and dismisses him from his palace so he can focus on looking for the assassin. From here, things go downhill, as you might expect. Oedipus talks to his wife, the former queen and widow of Laius, with whom Oedipus has already had children, mind you, and she is totally on the same page. Clairvoyant prophets are never right. I mean, she remembers a time when a prophet told her husband that his own son would kill him, and her son died in the woods abandoned several decades ago. This is probably the point where Oedipus starts to notice something is off, but chooses to investigate further anyway. At this point in the play, the audience knows exactly what is going on, and are cringing in their seats at how long this has to go on. The chorus reflects this, and sings about how sometimes it's better to avoid the ugly truth, and also, like in true Greek tragedy fashion, pride can lead to your downfall. Anyway, after much more torturous investigation, it's revealed that Oedipus killed what he thought was a random merchant on the road to Thebes, but it turned out to be King Laius, also his father. Everyone except Oedipus figures it out. Jocasta, the wife from earlier, begs him to just stop looking for the assassin, and all the people he questions refuse to speak until Oedipus forces them to by threatening to kill them. It's then revealed to everyone that Jocasta and Laius are in fact Oedipus's parents, and Oedipus has no choice but to accept it. Finally, the truth is out, and Jocasta kills herself, leaving Oedipus to scrape his own eyes out so he could no longer see the mess he had made. Pretty heavy stuff. And reading or watching the play, you really get this sense of it being drawn out much longer than it should be. This fits with the definition of Greek tragedy, though, obviously. Oedipus, a well-respected and loved king, has a hamartia, which can be interpreted as either pride or insatiable curiosity or both, and this hamartia leads him to make the wrong choice, which is to keep hunting the assassin even though several people whom he trusts tell him it's not a good idea. So you're probably wondering, like anyone would, why would such a thing be so popular? I mean, maybe the audience didn't know what was going to happen, and the shock of everything turning out wrong was surprising enough to outweigh the terrible secondhand pain that came from watching someone lose everything they ever loved. No. The ancient Greeks walked into the amphitheater knowing that they would be attending a tragedy, and they knew what a tragedy was. If that wasn't enough, in most Greek tragedies, it was clearly stated at the very beginning exactly what would happen to the hero. What's the deal then? Well, Aristotle's Poetics stated that the main purpose of writing and performing Greek tragedies for the public was catharsis. Experiencing such deep emotional pain was a way of releasing one's own pain. When you're introduced to a morally good and societally standard guy, and you watch him go through hell, you're inclined to share something with that guy. And that is the purification of your own feelings. You appreciate life more. You appreciate your ability to keep on going when bad things happen to you. And you're better prepared to handle unfortunate situations in your daily life. Feelings of guilt and regret are easily some of the strongest feelings we can feel, and that's for good reason, because if they weren't, we'd dismiss them and repeat mistakes that we've made in our past. Knowing that something is your fault and feeling the full weight of it pushes you through self-reflection and emotional purgation, which is necessary for growth. The ancient Greeks knew this. Watching a tragedy encourages you to examine yourself and face the issues that you refuse to address before they manifest in you finding out you killed your own father and married your own mother. It's also well understood nowadays that crying is good for you physiologically. It releases all sorts of neurotransmitters like oxytocin and endorphins, even more when it's in front of someone you trust. So it makes perfect sense that the ancient Greeks would take their loved ones to watch a play together and put themselves through emotional trauma to not only force themselves to look inside themselves, but become closer to those that they love through shared immersion in a painful experience. Aside from all this, it's not news to anyone that humans have a natural sense of morbid curiosity. This is why people often have a hard time looking away from car crashes, or why things like cringe compilations are popular nowadays. Tragedies are the same thing, except the car crash is very preventable and takes 80 minutes. If tragedies are so great, why don't we see them anymore? I mean, I suppose we still do find films that are often cited as modern Greek tragedies, like Old Boy and Citizen Kane and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which I watched for this very video, and by golly, is that a good movie. I mean, it's not a perfect Greek tragedy, but, well, that's for another video. These movies are not nearly as common or universally loved, nor do they fit the Greek tragedy formula perfectly. Besides, there's a reason that Citizen Kane has achieved the reputation of classic movie that only people who are super duper into film or storytelling enjoy. It's because movies are now almost purely entertainment, and it's becoming more uncommon for artsy films that treat it like a real good old-fashioned art medium to see the limelight. Plays weren't just something you could watch to escape from your daily life for a couple hours. They were an investment of your heart and mind. They took you on a painful journey that ended in self-reflection. And that's not to say movies don't do that anymore. It would be easy to hear what I've been telling you and go, wow, modern audiences are a bunch of dumb babies and movies are stupid now. But that's not the case at all. Modern people arguably have more to stress about than ever before. And so we've come up with many more different ways of working through that stress and looking inside of ourselves to confront our demons. Now, instead of watching a Greek tragedy for the purpose of catharsis, we can go to a therapist who has studied from textbooks filled with decades and decades of psychological analysis on millions of human brains. We can read a self-help book and throw out everything that doesn't spark joy. We can find emotional catharsis in religion. We can smoke a fat blunt and say forget about it. The options are near limitless. No, the reason we don't see tragedies as often is because the purpose of film and performance has changed. The things the average person values and the kinds of subjects they want to see in movies is different now than it was 2,500 years ago. Believe it or not. And obviously movies are still treated as art. They're still revered for their ability to evoke things in audiences that those audiences didn't even know they could feel. And they're praised for imitating reality far more accurately than Aristotle could have ever dreamed. It's just that sadness isn't a priority anymore. At least not for the same reasons. In the scene from Up, it breaks your heart when the lady is dead. But you don't really learn anything, you know? Sure, it acts as an uncomfortable confrontation with the fact that death comes for us all and that all good things come to an end, but it doesn't do anything beyond that. And I see this scene thrown around all the time with people saying they cried and everything, which isn't bad. In fact, it'd be weird if it didn't make you feel anything. But the purpose is entirely different. It's not truly tragic. I think even though we have all these new ways of coping with issues and promoting introspection, it would be interesting to see new tragedies. I don't know if you read Antigone, but it was crazy. It certainly put me through a few things. I think modern audiences would benefit from this kind of thing, even though I completely understand why it wouldn't be popular if Pixar just put out a reimagining of Antigone where a bunch of, cats dressed up as humans hang themselves at the end because one of them refuses to erect a memorial cat scratching post for a fallen neighborhood cat. I mean, I guess Watership Down is a thing, but anyway, my point is that Greek tragedy is a beautiful form of art, and I think watching a movie that hurts you and makes you think about your life is really important for personal growth. Archaic as it is, I think it would be nice if it was given more attention. There are plenty of artists that would undoubtedly leap at the chance to create something as intense and scarring as a Greek tragedy set in the modern world. I just wish people would recognize the value in it, rather than dismissing it as an experience that won't do anything but bum them out. Alright, that's about all I have to say about Greek tragedies. Or, I guess it would be more accurate to say that's all I will say about Greek tragedies, for now. Thanks for watching this all the way through, and let me know what you thought. Later.